Sean, if you had to kill one character in The Way of Kings and it can't be Sadeas, who would it be?
You're not going to like the answer.
Say it.
It's Shallan.
Damn.
100%. I know. It's terrible. Terrible. I know.
Oh,
it's not that I hate her, but she's pretty obnoxious.
Okay.
What's going on, y'all? This is Alexander. You are plugged into the Nerd Companion.
What's going on, y'all? This is Alexander from the Nerd Companion coming at you with a special episode going over a series that I'm reading that I got roped into, Stormlight Archives. We're going to be talking about book one, The Way of Kings. I got my buddy Sean over here. Give us a quick introduction, or as long introduction as you want.
Hey there, my name's Sean. I'm from all around here and there. I've been into all sorts of nerdy stuff. I played Magic on and off since 1993. Huge Lord of the Rings fan, massive Wheel of Time fan, really like Brandon Sanderson, into a lot of different things. Doing a Final Fantasy VII playthrough, the original, of course.
Is your first time?
Oh, no, playthrough. This
Okay.
is, I think, number 4.
Okay.
So that's what I'm up to right now.
Such a good game. Speaking of Final Fantasy, we're going to be doing a Final Fantasy series here soon. So excited to do that one. Yeah. How'd you get exposed to Stormlight Archives?
It was probably two simultaneous things. I love the Wheel of Time. I took a long hiatus from the series right around Path of Daggers when that came out, and didn't read any Wheel of Time for about 10 years.
Which book is that one, Path of Daggers?
That's Path of Daggers should be the 9th. I think it's the 9th book. During that time period, Robert Jordan, the author, passed away, and things were up in the air for a while, and then we heard it was getting finished by a guy named Brandon Sanderson. I had never heard of him. Flash forward a few years, I still had not caught up. I started rereading it because it had been so long, the Wheel of Time, that is.
That's commitment, gee.
And my buddy was telling me about this Mistborn series, and he's like, it's Brandon Sanderson. And it took me a while to make the connection that this was the same person. So started learning more about Brandon Sanderson, finished the Wheel of Time, loved how Brandon finished the series. I was very doubtful anybody could do it. He pulled it off. It's fantastic.
That's such a big task, for any writer that's writing their own series, let alone someone jumping in the end of a series.
Definitely. And I know Sanderson attributes Robert Jordan to being one of the reasons he became an author in the first place. So what a great person to pick to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's solid.
And after I finished Wheel of Time, I wanted to try some Sanderson out. And a buddy of mine that I worked with in the lab at the time told me, you should read The Way of Kings. You should read Stormlight Archive. And so I did, and it grabbed me. I was into it for a long time.
Yeah, it's such a good book. I had a buddy at work that told me to read it. I read maybe the first 10 chapters. I got busy with school and then jumped back in and could not put it down. It was so good, which is refreshing because I was in a rut with reading. I was reading a couple of series that were just barely okay, and it was just a chore to get through. And to jump into something that was just captivating to keep you just turning the page and you didn't want to stop, like you wanted to binge it, was very refreshing. I feel like I haven't really felt anything like that since Harry Potter, probably for me.
Yeah, it's great. It really is good. His characters are fantastic. The world building is phenomenal. Coming from Jordan, and you expect a lot, and he delivers a very unique and different way. He does a great job.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good segue into the book. Let's go ahead and talk about it. The Way of Kings. You can go ahead and start if you want to talk about the world and how it's built.
Yeah, so Brandon Sanderson has this concept of a cosmere, the idea that all of his different book series are from the same universe or multiverse, and little things interact with other things in the other stories. And The Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive takes place on a planet called Roshar, dominated by a main supercontinent also of the same name. And the main kind of founding difference between Roshar and an Earth-like planet would be the high storms. So these are these massive planet-spanning hurricanes that pass across the continent. And they always start at what's called the origin, far in the east, off the shore of the continent. And they pass across the continent, and except for a few small places, the majority of the continent is just ravaged by these storms, and the ecology and the biology of the plant and animal life is all evolved
Right.
to handle that.
I thought that was really, really interesting. At first, I didn't catch it when I was reading it. Some of the characters, when they would be walking around outside, they would be talking about some of the flora that would move after a storm and kind of reform and take a different shape to adapt to a different weather. Essentially, they kind of have these defense mechanisms, which I thought was actually really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they have these storms that basically come by. That's pretty normal for them, but as you said, they're pretty destructive.
Yeah, and they can predict when they're coming through complex math predictions. But yeah, and humans, all their buildings, everything has evolved for these high storms. I mean, it's very, very uncommon for a person to be outside during a high storm and survive. And I guess we'll get into that.
My favorite part of the book. So yeah, I mean, we can jump right into currency. We're talking about the high storms, the currency. You have the gem. It's all gem hearts, correct? Or see, the gem hearts are the big ones.
That's definitely the primary source. So the currency they're called spheres, and what they are there's what are they? Chips, shards, and bromes. 3 different sizes of piece of a gemstone, and there's sapphire, emeralds, rubies, diamonds, and topazes, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't remember them talking about mining. I think that the source is the gem hearts.
I can't remember the details. You have to apologize going through this book. Whenever we start going through it, some of the timing might be a little timey-wimey. And that's just like 3 stories going on.
Yeah, but the currency is cool because it's these little pieces of crystal or gemstones, and it's one side is flattened so they don't roll around. You can actually recharge them with something called Stormlight during the high storms.
Right.
They put them in like little bags and baskets, and as the high storm passes by, it recharges them with magic.
I feel like it's energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember. Sanderson has a term for it, but I can't remember what he calls it. And that is such a cool concept to me because, we don't have to go a ton into it, but the idea that, money should have some intrinsic value, but then it's also used as an exchanger for goods.
Right.
Right. Just by definition, money in general. The value of spheres in his story, in the Stormlight Archive, goes even beyond having an intrinsic value to being the intrinsic value, being able to use that for, what are they, the soul casters and the...
Use it for fabrials.
Yeah, the fabrials.
So essentially, I mean, you have people like soul casters or those who have kind of like these mech devices that can basically use the magic or the energy in these shards to either make food or power up, energy for a house, or there's just so many different things you can use these for, which make them so valuable. And even if you have these shards and they're full and you don't have the accessibility to do those things, they still have value because somebody can use that for something. So the economy makes sense. And that's one of the things that I really liked about the story, was that he created an entire economy, essentially. And it makes sense. It makes sense.
It's cool too. I mean, just the fact that the currency absorbs Stormlight, that's a security measure. that's one of the main reasons why charged spheres not are worth more, but people will be much less enthusiastic about accepting spent spheres versus charged spheres because they know it's real.
It can be used now,
Mm-hmm.
instead of waiting for a high storm to recharge them. But yeah, I really like that I thought that was really cool. Really cool signal. So yeah, let's jump right into the intro. We'll kind of talk about set up the story of the book, and we'll talk about kind of a brief synopsis for those that are looking to get into the book, and then we'll kind of give like the warning that because we'll kind of talk about the specifics, and they'll probably contain some spoilers. So if you don't want to read the book and you don't want the spoilers, we'll give a warning for sure before we move forward. But without further ado, the intro is pretty interesting because you have two characters that seem to be on some sort of and they're looking out on this cataclysm, and there's just destruction and death everywhere, and something went down, but the reader doesn't really know what's going on as to what happened. And the two characters, do you remember their name?
I do not. I know what they are.
So they're two heralds, correct? And the heralds are an order of protectors of the realm that have supernatural abilities that have been gifted to them by the Almighty. Is it the Almighty?
According to the Voran Church, but
it's their deity, whoever their God. And they're basically having this conversation, and they're basically saying that they're going to relinquish their responsibility, their obligation to protect humanity. And there seems to be a struggle between the two because one doesn't really want to give it up. He's kind of confused, it seemed to me. And then they turn and look, and there's this boulder, and there's weapons basically thrown in, kind of like, what's that?
Multitude, sword in the stone.
Yeah, sword in the stone. Yeah, so there's a bunch of swords in this giant stone, and, they're basically relinquishing their obligation to protect humanity at this point. And that's all we really know. But there's someone who's not there, that's not accounted for, that's lost in the desolation, if I remember correctly. That's pretty much the intro.
Yeah, Sanderson does that, and that's actually really kind of similar to how the Wheel of Time starts, where you get a snapshot view in the far past of something going on, and you don't know the context, and Sanderson reveals it slowly.
The mystery box.
Yeah, the mystery box.
He does a good job with that. And then it goes right into a chapter that is really action-packed. You meet a character named Seth the Truthless. I forget his name, something. Seth the Truthless. He's at a party, and his goal is to assassinate a king. The way that they do this combat in this scene is so awesome because it reminded me of Inception. Like they use so if you consider a cube, they can basically, or how they explain it, lashing themselves to different parts of the wall, and their gravity changes. And it was just really interesting how they use that mechanic to fight. And it just really reminded me of the Inception scene where they're running on the walls, jumping to other walls as everything's turning. But in fact, Seth has the ability to manipulate gravity, or at least is what it appears to me, to get him. So he's got this little aura where he's basically able to control his gravity and his mechanics. But what did you think about that?
It was great. I mean, I really enjoy reading about magic systems when they make sense. I don't really have a preference for hard versus soft magic systems, but I like when an author is able to describe what is happening. So you get the feeling of knowing what Seth is doing, and knowing I'm not just, saying magic words and something happens. I'm altering physical reality, and I'm doing it in a very specific way. And I liked how that was written. It gets you into it.
Yeah. I think if my mom said it this way, there's the difference between science fiction readers and fantasy readers, is that fantasy readers, whenever magic is applied and you're talking about soft versus hard, a fantasy reader can read that and not need a specific explanation as to why or how it happens. You just accept it, right? You're just bathing in the majesty of the magic, right? As opposed to someone who reads science fiction who enjoys the explanation of how technology works. And if the technology doesn't work in a science fiction story, it's going to get trashed by the sci-fi community. And I feel like Sanderson does such a good job with making logical laws and mechanics of the magic. And I feel he's really setting something up later on in the series that there's going to be a chain reaction to things, is what it seems like he's going to do, because he's so intricate with the laws of each radiant or herald in which line of discipline that they are chosen to walk, right?
Yeah, and he's on record for saying that he took a lot of the influence of his magic system from the four forces, from physics. How would those be? What would that look like if you could manipulate one of the four physical forces in a magic-like setting, to be able to do it via willpower versus using technology? And I haven't quite wrapped my head around all of it yet, but he has added a lot more, and it makes more sense. But yeah, there's a lot of components to magic and magic systems. I mean, we haven't even talked about Sprin yet.
Yeah. The if I could relate how Stormlight Archives is, it reminds me of a Final Fantasy game. Like, it really does. Like, the way that you kind of have, not to get too much into the weeds, but there's these devices called fabrials, right? And they are it's basically technology that humans have made to emulate the power of the heralds and the radiants themselves. And a lot of people rely on these fabrials, and it takes discipline to learn how to use these fabrials. There's different kinds of fabrials that do different things. And it just really reminds me of Final Fantasy VI, where they have these devices to augment human power and ability to come closer to the gods, essentially.
Right. And humans have taken a systematic and scientific approach to the research of fabrials. I mean, you're taking a Sprin, you're taking a conscious spirit that can manifest itself in the material plane, and you're matching it with a sphere.
Right.
And then they do something. I remember the one is you match it's a fire Sprin with a ruby, and then it can heat your house. And it's just a low, slow burning heat. Humans, especially the Alethi, have really taken interest in researching how these fabrials work, and, putting money and effort into it.
Yeah. It's just really good. Sanderson does a really good job. I mean, we could get into the weeds all day. Like, I feel like there's so many intricate things and that's the one thing I like about the series too, is that it does a good job introducing these ideas and mechanics in a way that you're not reading a whole chapter on how something works. You're learning it from the dialogue that feels natural between characters, and it's easy to kind of pick up. I find that there's other fantasy books or even science fiction. I think that's why I get bored with science fiction. I love science fiction, but I get too bogged down by the pages of explanation of how certain technology works that I just don't care about. I'm like, dude, just tell me it works, I'll believe it. I'm like, I'm good.
A lot of it is show don't tell. I mean, regardless of the genre, if you're going through a bunch of paragraphs and you're just being told how something works, it's boring. It's not engaging.
But Sanderson does a really good job.
Yeah,
of
showing
organically without. So basically, Seth ends up killing the king, and this is kind of a catalyst for the Alethi to kind of go through this arduous, never-ending, hopeless war that essentially loses its cause. And you kind of jump to the present time after that, and you're met with certain characters. I don't even know who to start with. I'm pretty sure it starts with Kaladin.
Really quick, let's just talk about, in addition to humans on Roshar, you have the Parshmen and the Parshendi. The Parshmen are...
Yeah, let's talk about that.
They're humanoids. They're very dull-witted. The Parshmen. Humans have basically enslaved them. They trade them as chattel, and they use them for manual labor. Very simple manual labor.
This book is extremely racy. And this book is all about race.
Didn't talk about light eyes and dark eyes either.
Classes.
Yeah. Race and class conflict. And well, anyway, the king was Dalinar's brother, Gavilar. Gavilar discovers on the Shattered Plains, far to the west, near the origin of the high storms, he finds a group of Parshman people that have independent thought, and they have multiple forms, and they name them the Parshendi. They're like thinking Parshmen. And so he becomes fascinated with them, invites them to his
Party.
He has a big brouhaha, and that is where Seth shows up and kills the king. And
Contract to the Parshendi.
well, yeah, they exactly they like
make any sense.
they claim responsibility for it, and it launches Alethkar into this war of attrition against the Parshendi for killing their king. But
It's basically a war of revenge.
yeah,
Initially.
but they were only recently united under one high king, and there's all these
Everybody's ass.
yeah, there's all these other high princes that vie for power, and so
Very much Game of Thronesy.
and it's very financially motivated as well, because on the Shattered Plains are these
The creatures?
chasm fiends, these giant crustaceans, and inside of their bodies is a gem heart, which is a ton of gems, which is worth a ton of money. So most of the presented motivation of revenge against the king is actually just to make money. So that's where we find our character, Kaladin.
It's basically the Iraq War. It's basically what it is.
There are some parallels.
Fair, but we're there for oil.
There are some parallels.
There's a lot of parallels in this book.
But meet Kaladin. He's branded as a slave and also as violent slave, branded on his forehead, and he's
So everybody knows.
being transported somewhere you don't know. And so you start to learn about his past. He's broken, and
There's a song for him that I heard. I heard it and I said, this is Kaladin's song.
really,
In constant sorrow, all through his day, I am a man of constant sorrow. Yeah, that song is.
that's funny. I saw your pomade can over there. That's a good connection.
I'm a dapper damn man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kaladin's on his way. He's branded a slave, and he, unbeknownst to him, is going to the Shattered Plains to be fodder for the campaign of the so-called revenge, but really there for gem hearts and riches.
And I like how Sanderson started off very sweeping and epic for both of those events, with the heralds and then with Seth and the king, and then goes down to just the lowliest, most broken person being sold into slavery. And so you really get to focus on one individual and his struggles.
Yeah. So he's a victim of circumstance, and it seems that all these bad things happen to him. And there's flashbacks that kind of describe different stories of his upbringing. His dad wanted him to be a surgeon. He wanted to be a soldier, and he's got this conflict, and some events turn, and he ends up becoming a soldier, obviously, because he's talking about himself as a soldier whenever you're reading. So you know that what decision he makes as a kid. And you kind of get this coming of age tale broken to glory tale for Kaladin, right? And it's just such a good story. We can get to the specifics when we get into the spoilers and stuff. But tell us about Dalinar.
Dalinar is he is the noble knight with a troubled past.
He's Neddard Stark to me.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely, he
Righteous.
righteous, dealing with, decades of war crimes in his past.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
he's kind of got this struggle where, talk about his struggle, his conflict.
So he has so many.
Well, just the big one, just like the big arc.
So Dalinar is the brother of the killed king. And so he's placed into a regulatory position. Kind of, he doesn't mind, he doesn't think that it's beneath him, but it is beneath his ability.
For sure.
And, he has his nephew, who is the new High King of Alethkar.
How old is he? Is he in his 20s?
I think, yeah, his nephew's in his 20s. Dalinar, I would say, is early 50s. And
Who would you cast him? If they did a show.
Ooh, I don't know. You know whose photo I think of though is Baldur's Gate 2. Is his name Keldorn? Oh, that's a good casting. Yeah.
That's who I think about.
Yeah, Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin would be a phenomenal Dalinar. I agree.
He's got the look. Every time I think of him, like I think of Josh Brolin. Like Goonies, Josh Brolin. Goonies? The Goonies?
Yeah, I've seen the original.
He's the older brother.
Yeah, that's right. He is. Wow.
Doing all the...
Yeah, exactly.
Josh Brolin for sure. If they did a cast, for sure.
That would be a good casting. So he's struggling because he sees the dissolution of his brother's kingdom. And yes, they were tribal, warlike, belligerent, but Dalinar especially started to believe in the messages of the Knights Radiant, to believe that this is worth uniting for.
Right.
And he starts to have a lot of other things that are...
So before we go into the...
Yeah.
So he's basically taking this stand that he's kind of cleaning up his act. He's listening to a book that's being read to him because for some odd reason, men are not allowed to read. It's a feminine trait. He's being read this book called The Way of Kings, and it reminds me of a lot of Jesus's parables. To me, it was very Christian-like. Not doing things to help others. It's not beneath you, even if you're royalty, living, a sober life and always being ready in the line of duty. And it's a stark contrast to his past because he was a ruthless killer as Blackthorn, and he was drunk on the night of his brother's murder, and he carries that guilt with him his whole life, because if he wasn't drinking and, running around in debauchery, he could have saved his brother. Although we can get into that later. He probably wouldn't have been able to do it anyway, but he has this enlightenment, and he's trying to live this life of this orderly, sober, always ready, honor before everything life, and everyone around him, all the high princes, all the different houses, are still living in the old, debauchery ways. And he's being kind of outcasted because of his acts. Now, let's talk about the supernatural thing that's going on with him that is really kind of pushing him to the outside.
Yeah, so Dalinar, as a secret, he has started to have very, very powerful visions during high storms. So whenever a high storm rolls in, not only is he have to be indoors away from the high storm, he has to be away from everybody, because he doesn't want to freak out anybody and put his family into question. He's not really concerned about his reputation, but the reputation of his sons, and
who is also is an up and coming,
Yeah, Adolin, his son. And the visions are showing him visions of the past.
We don't have to get too deep. Let's not get
Yeah, okay. So that's one of his other struggles that he's worried about. And
because he's basically night terrors. I imagine it's like seizures and night terrors. It's kind of like he's just thrashing about. He's screaming things that no one understands. And he's supposed to be the uncle of the king. And people are thinking that he's getting old. Is he losing the shit? Like, he got dementia? Like, what's going on?
And combining the Alethi traditions and culture with the Vorin church, which is very, very orthodox, very restrictive. He's like, I can't let anybody find out about these for all these reasons.
Yeah. So he's trying to do right by the kingdom. He wants to unite everyone, but he's doing it in a way that's not openly accepted to everyone else around him. And it essentially is making him an outcast. Let's talk about Shallan, your favorite character.
Yeah, Shallan. I wouldn't say I really, really like her character in this book. Let's put it that way. I really like it. Shallan is from Yakaved. So she is not Alethi. She comes to be a student, an apprentice for
the heretic.
Yes.
Jasna. However, there's so many different ways people pronounce it.
Jasna Kholin, which is Dalinar's niece,
the king's sister, Navani's daughter.
Yeah,
but she's an outcast herself because she's labeled a heretic because she's basically questioned religion essentially.
Yeah.
And I think she's misunderstood because she's not necessarily questioning because she doesn't believe. She's questioning because she wants to prove. She's trying to prove something. She's not trying to disprove anything. And so she's very fact-based in her approach and her practice with her studies. She's basically a scholar, historian. I forget what the name of it is, but she's trying to figure out something that we can get into later. And yeah, Shallan's trying to basically become her ward.
Yeah, and it runs in the family. It runs in the family to search for truth, actual intrinsic truth. And so Yasna Kholin is very, very learned, very accomplished woman. In this society, men don't read. Women have the higher academic and scholarly pursuits, and Yasna's near the top.
Yeah.
And so Shallan travels from Yakaved to wherever she was studying, I can't remember, and she applies to be Yasna's apprentice. Yasna's really impressed with her, but she has some holes in her education.
Yeah.
What was it? Philosophy
is one that's he definitely learns.
So, but we do find out that pretty early on that Shallan has an ulterior motive for becoming Yasna's apprentice. So that whole time, you're really conflicted on who do I trust here and who's in the right. And
that's the philosophy.
Yes,
it was almost poetic that she's got this philosophical conflict and she's learning about philosophy from Yasna. Yeah, we don't have to get too deep. Any other characters? There's Sadeas. It's used to be Dalinar's friend.
Foil.
And they're not so much friends anymore. They're cordial, but definitely different beliefs. Dalinar's the straight and narrow. Sadeas is I'm going to kill everything and get drunk and get hammered, kind of like your berserker.
Idealism versus pragmatism, cold versus caring for the people that are under you.
Correct. Yeah.
They
has no value for human life.
They are dipoles.
We can talk about Adolin briefly. Adolin is Dalinar's son, very promising soldier. Definitely has no limits as to where he's going. You kind of get that idea when you're reading him. Kind of pompous and spoiled, but other than that, he's probably an okay guy.
He struggles with Dalinar's limits that Dalinar places not only on his sons, but on himself.
Right.
He struggles with that. The idea that why to some ancient set of principles when nobody else around me does.
Yeah.
And I'm better at them at fencing. I'm better at them at all of these different things. Why, he's just young, he's inexperienced, but he has, like you said, unlimited potential. And he's a good guy at heart.
I really like him.
He is aching to be let off the chain.
Yeah, dude, he's a rabid dog, ready to go. I like him a lot. He's kind of pompous, but I always kind of fall for the characters that are again kind of a douchebag, but then they get humbled, and all of the things that made them kind of like this douchey character was because they're excellent at a bunch of things, right? Like believes in himself, he's very confident, and he lets that show, but then, is humbled, and it really just hones everything in that you see later on in the series. But Devani is another character that's the mother of the king, widow from the murdered king Gavilar. She gets introduced. We can talk about her later. But another thing that I wanted to talk about with Seth that was interesting is as being a ruthless killer as he is, he seems to be self-loathing and has nothing but remorse, which makes him such an interesting character because he's just a killing machine. But in the dialogue or in the monologues he doesn't like what he's doing. But we can get into that later. So overall, basically, the story is basically follows Kaladin, Dalinar, Shallan. They all have their individual stories, and then they all just collide in the middle. And Shallan, not so much in the first book, but she has a very interesting story. But all the characters end up kind of meeting in the middle, and the arcs every character's arc is so good. Kaladin's broken man to what he ends up doing, Dalinar with his vindication, and then Shallan basically
chooses her family, really.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, she's still holds old oaths, but she opens up her heart to new possibilities and new beliefs in other people.
And it's kind of like, I don't want to say rags to riches, because she wasn't necessarily a poor person, but her family was kind of put in a predicament that essentially is the reason why she's going to earn her stewardship under Yasna. But she really seizes opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I really like her character. She can be a little arrogant sometimes. A lot of the stuff she says makes me laugh. Like reading it, she's funny. But yeah, so overall, how did you feel about the book in a general sense, without getting any spoilers, because we're coming up to the spoilers next? But
are we doing like a rating right now?
Yeah, 0 out of 10.
0 out of 10. I would give it a solid 7, even a 7.5 if we're gonna barstool this.
Yeah,
I would say 7.5. It really, really grabbed me.
That's you seem to be like me when it comes to ratings, that it's hard to give like a 10. It's an excellent book. Don't think because it's a 7.5 like it's like average. Like this book is
No, this isn't a video game rating from
IGN.
Yeah. This is a true 0 out of 10. I mean, this is a very, very high rated book. It grabbed me. It wasn't even in my questioning whether or not I was going to continue the story. I had to.
Right.
It is a very, very, very good book, and I would say 7.5. It's not. I wouldn't have. I don't even really feel like we need to talk about gripes, because it grabbed me. And
I have a couple, but they were gripes before I read book 2 and started on 3, that I understand why certain things didn't happen. But it's a 7.5, huh?
That's what I'd say. What'd you give it?
I give it a 7.5, or like close to 8. To me, this book, I guess I was busy when I read the first 10 chapters, so I wasn't really focused. But when I came back to it and actually like told myself, just read a chapter a night, never ended up reading just a chapter a night. It ended up reading 300 pages until I fell asleep with my Paperwhite slapping me in the face. Such a good book. Very refreshing. The pacing's good. If you're a fan for character development, and you're going to love this book. You're going to love this book, because there's so much character development and growth that even in the moments where you think it's going to be boring because of the way that the chapter starts, you're just so enthralled with these characters. And it reminds me of Breaking Bad, with how important the personalities, traits, their tics, their everything is just stays true to principle, to who they are, and they never break character unless they're evolving as a character. And I really enjoyed it. Solid book. One of my favorite books of all time. So good. I binged it. I'm a slow reader, and I think whenever I got started, it took me 2 weeks to get through all 1,000 pages, and I'm a very slow reader. So if you're a fast reader, you probably get done quick. All right. So at this point, we're going to be doing spoilers. So if you just want to click it off, you haven't read it and you want to read the book, it's a high recommended read. The second book is really good. Just started the third one, and it's not letting up. It's really good. So if you're going to read the book, I highly recommend it. The series is good so far. Any last thoughts before we dig into the trenches?
Also the audiobook, because I did go back and listen to the audiobook. I'm terrible. It's Michael Kramer and it's his wife. It's the same duo that did The Wheel of Time. They do a phenomenal job. Very, very good. If you're short on time and you've got a long commute, or if you just prefer audiobooks, this is a 9 or a 10 for reading. For an audiobook. They're so fantastic. I feel terrible that I don't remember her name, but
I think she'll forgive you.
We'll get it in a moment.
All right, we're going to be getting into the spoilers. Not necessarily, we're not trying to spoil anything, but we're going to be talking about openly at this point about the book, some of our favorite things.
First of all, audiobook, it's Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. Apologies, Ms. Redding.
That's serious.
Yep, she's fantastic. So anyway.
Shalon. So when I was reading the book, I think the first 12, maybe 15 chapters, I was not reading those little interludes. And my buddy was like, hey, are you reading those interludes? Those little snippets? Nah, man, No, you should read that. You should read those. And I just thought when it was all revealed right there at the end, like what was going on, I was like, holy shit, it's a big like reveal or a big, oh my God. But they really portray the king of Kharbranth as this really caring person, which he might be.
I don't think so.
No.
I think he's a sociopath. 100, at least when his psyche is aligned.
Right, because it seems like he has a polarity shift back intelligence versus compassion, I think, which really isn't, I think that's talking about the second book. But I didn't realize what I was reading. And then whenever he's basically, because he's the head of the hospital.
He markets
everyone.
He markets himself as a philanthropist.
Yeah. And you find out that he's basically bleeding these people out and he's killing them just to hear what their last words are, because when they die, they get these visions or they transition to a different realm, and he's trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah, he's trying to reveal truths through people's suffering and death.
So I was trying to rationalize in my head, surely he's just getting people who are about to die on the brink of death. Let's bleed them out. There's something sinister about it, and I wasn't sure if there was something he was doing with the blood or he was just bleeding them out because it's just an efficient way to kill someone. But he's basically taking the patients and he's just bleeding them out, killing them, just so they can transition to the other realm or see whatever they see when they die to reveal truths that he's trying to figure out. And it doesn't really tell you much of anything, but I wasn't sure if he was getting into some blood magic or whatever. Dude, is he doing something with his blood? It just seems so crazy. I might have been reading too deep into it, but dude, what a freak show.
Does this possibly have a connection to our medical insurance industry and our government being in cahoots to slowly bleed us dry of all of our money and health?
No. Why would they do that?
Never.
That was pretty interesting that the little snippets in the beginning of the chapters are something that's revealed later, and that's certainly the case with the other books as well.
And there are interludes that don't make any sense. That's the best part.
Sense, except for Seth. To me at the time.
Yeah, but I mean, there's always some little interludes that is it the first book that has the one with the fish and the guy talking about all the different fish? There's
fisherman. There's gets meat by the world hoppers. Talking about that one where they're looking for wit.
Yes. And
I guess they were looking for wit.
I mean, maybe my comprehension wasn't really good, but at the time that didn't make any sense to me at all, even at the end of the book.
I don't think any of the interludes make any sense.
Okay.
There's several that had involved a character that was tied to a main character, but to me it was just these rando stories, and my friend swears that they're important, but they were so anecdotal, like the names and the characters, that if I read something about it later in another book, I wouldn't even remember.
Yeah, it makes me think maybe they're not even in Roshar, past, present, or future. Maybe they're on another Cosmere or
in Mistborn.
Yeah, something.
So okay, so let's talk about wit. Did we even talk about wit in the beginning?
I don't think so. No, we didn't.
No, Wit's such an interesting character. I love him so much. I feel like that's Sanderson's humor. That's him pouring his sick humor on the way I can see him talking to people like that, jokingly.
Yeah.
And I think that's this is me. And he himself is the world hopper because he's writing and jumping into these different stories. At least that's how I read into it.
It's possible. I mean, in terms of writing and in terms of, I know Sanderson's very well educated. He teaches courses on writing, but when I read Wit and I was writing some other things and working on short stories, and in my head, I'm translating things from Dungeons and Dragons as well. So, I'm thinking about base stats and how do you write someone who's more charismatic than you? How do you write someone who's more intelligent than you?
I don't think you can. You're writing your limit.
So maybe that's true. If so, then Brandon Sanderson is a very charismatic and very intelligent.
It's coming from you. It's native.
Yeah, it's true.
Are we ever going to get into a deep philosophical conversation?
Well, that's just who Wit personified to me was somebody that is beyond my intelligence.
Okay.
And
I definitely had to read a couple things over again that he was saying. Wait, what? Oh, God.
he is very, very dialed in, and obviously he's more than what he seems. I mean, he is a very interesting character. So it's the King's Wit. That's his title.
I imagined him when I first read was a jester, the court jester, but he's not a jester. Like, he doesn't do it to perform for himself.
He serves the same purpose, though. He serves the purpose of, I can say whatever I want to the king, and the king's not going to kill me. And therefore, the king is showing benevolence, and there's at least the presented illusion of free speech.
Do you think that he's doing that because he thinks that he doesn't understand him, or that he speaks so cryptically, but makes so much sense with his double meanings and his innuendos that by the time someone registers it, he's already on the next thing, and so he's already like a step ahead, and they can't keep up?
As to what are Wit's motivations?
Well, I'm saying you said you could talk to Elakar and get away with it. You think because he's just so witty, he's quick, no one catches what he's saying?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think a lot of people know what I mean. I know that he grates on Dalinar.
Which is classic because Dalinar has no imagination.
But Dalinar doesn't hate Wit. But
he finds him annoying, but yeah, he doesn't.
Infuriates Sadeas.
Everyone infuriates Sadeas. He's such a bitch.
It's true. But in such a way where Sadeas would have had him killed long ago if he thought he could get away with it, but also
had the ability to.
Right. Sadeas thinks that Wit is just a normal human and that he could just kill him. And I don't think that's not the case at all. So
it was told to me that Wit is actually a character who is in a lot of Sanderson's books in Mistborn, where he's a world hopper, so he's in tune with the Cosmere.
Okay.
Did you know?
And that I did not, but that makes sense.
You read Mistborn, didn't you?
I did not.
Okay,
I have not read Mistborn.
So Wit is a character who jumps. He's actually by another name in Mistborn, and that name is said in one of the interludes in one of the chapters, and I only remember this because I did a recap for this episode. It's the fisherman and the lake, and the three world hoppers are looking for their mysterious man, and it's presumed to be Wit, but they name him by the name that he was in Mistborn.
In Mistborn, okay. Yeah, that's very, very interesting.
Yeah. I imagine him as this character who has this hood, and he's just got this side smile, and he's got this furrowed brow. If you covered his mouth, he looks like he's angry, but if you cover his eyes, he looks like he's just very...
Yeah, very off-putting. That concept of being able to travel between worlds and to affect them in massive ways and then just leave for a period of indeterminate time.
He's that dude that shows up at parties and does some really cool shit, bounces out and goes to another party, and then comes back to the party. See, where you been for 3 hours? He was bad.
And then months later, you hear about that other party that happened that you couldn't attend because you were at party one. And they have stories of that same guy. How does this guy even get around?
I had a friend like that in the Navy, dude.
Yeah.
And booze was always involved. He would disappear, and then he would end up back with us. Like, no one told him where we were at, and he just would find us. And where have you been? He was like, over here with these people. I'm like, what?
I had a shipmate that would run whenever we were out. He'd get too many in him, and he would just take off. You'd have to chase him down. He'd run into traffic if you didn't grab him.
Interesting characters in the military.
Party animal.
Yeah, but Wit, he's such an interesting character. And actually, now that I'm sitting here talking about this with you, I think I'm making a connection now that I don't know why I didn't see, or I might be overshooting. But the guy who in the prologue that wasn't there is the guy at the end of the book.
The crazy guy in the hospital?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's the guy who shows up. Is it the guy who shows up with the shard blade, with the honor blade at the very end and like throws it into the ground and collapses?
Yes, he's one of the heralds.
See, I must have missed that. Well, we don't have to get too deep into like all book 2, but
I'm pretty sure you can surmise it just
because he has an honor blade.
Right.
Seth has an honor blade. That's why I was confused. So there's another lunatic. I mean, he's a lunatic, but he's not really a lunatic. Just probably old as shit.
He's just been tortured for 4,500 years.
Oh, I don't know that yet.
It's okay.
You ruined it. I'm done reading this book.
That's the cool part, is you can learn things about the lore. You know, with my paltry, forgive me, research that I did before this podcast, I ran into a bunch of stuff about the Cosmere and about Mistborn and all that, and even learning about all of it, it doesn't detract from the entertainment and the experience of reading the novel.
Right.
So good.
Right. But it's not big enough to be read. That's interesting that happened there, but was also here at a later time.
It's if you made someone a 5-course meal and you said course 3 has garlic in it. Okay, that's cool. That's not going to ruin my experience of having the dish, you know?
Right. Right.
That you learn those little things, and sometimes it almost enhances it.
Yeah. It almost encourages like a little delving onto the old fandom without getting too deep. It kind of puts something in perspective.
Right.
But yeah, going into the Cosmere, there's like so many different things happening at once in different worlds that you get like little windows and these little interludes that I at the time didn't really find important. And I think that's probably my only gripe. I just wouldn't remember. I would have to have someone tell me, oh yeah, that was that interlude in book 2. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But I've been paying a little more attention to the interludes in book 2, or I did. But Wit is amazing. He's such a good character. He's one of my favorites. What's one of your favorite things about this book?
I would say Kaladin's redemption. Kaladin's redemption is so solid. It's so good. And the way that Sanderson presents Kaladin's past, when you start to learn about, you know, him growing up as a very well-off Dark Eyes. His father was a surgeon.
Dark Eyes.
He was a surgeon and well-respected in his community.
Was he, though?
Well, he ends up...
was his dad really respected?
Yeah, I mean, he does...
He was needed.
Steal some money.
He didn't steal it. I refuse to believe it. Even if he admitted it, I don't believe it. That was his. He left it for him.
Possible.
That whole... Yeah, I feel like we can go on for eternity about Kaladin.
And just the fact that, you know, Kaladin was restless as a young man. He didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps. He wanted to become a warrior, a soldier.
For glory, he thought.
Right. His father persuaded him against it. And then because his younger brother gets drafted, he volunteers to go with as well to...
That whole thing is so gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
Getting sick to the pit of my stomach reading that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, Roshan, you dirty dude.
Yeah, Amaram is just such a just a terrible human being. And
He's terrible?
Amaram?
I thought he was actually... So I was convinced in book 1 that he was lawful neutral, if we're going with the D&D characteristics, was that he understood that if Kaladin didn't take that blade and he gave it to someone else, that was not going to fly with the laws and traditions of their belief system.
And I think he also believed that Kaladin would come back for it because it was his right. But he did not understand.
Think that he would have let Kaladin keep it?
That's a good question. I mean,
in a world where he took it,
could Amaram have, you know, killed everybody else in his unit and disgraced him if Kaladin possessed the shard blade and the plate?
I don't think that he would have killed everybody.
He might not.
There's a part of me that was like, Amaram would have let him have it, but he still wanted a shard blade for his own purposes. That's not really revealed at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we are our actions, though.
Yeah.
You know, so regardless of his motives, regardless of why he did it, like he said, you know, lawful neutral. Sure, yeah, he was following the laws and customs of Alethkar, but...
Yeah, jacked up law. I'm not saying like lawfully
it
was good. I'm saying the law of his belief system.
Yeah, so maybe you can't color him evil yet, but I definitely had disdain for him, and...
Oh, for sure.
You just intrinsically empathize with Kaladin's struggle, and...
It's such a good arc.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Just him taking over Bridge 4. I mean, it's, we talk about the parallels with the other characters. I mean, Kaladin is doing the same thing that Dalinar is. He's focusing on honor, even though he doesn't want to name it. He just does it by,
Because it's natural.
yeah, because it's natural to him.
It's in his heart.
Taking care of the wounded, learning how to do a side carry to protect people in Bridge 4. All of those things he was doing, I mean, at his lowest. I mean, he had resolved himself to die a horrible death. That's what being a member of a bridge crew meant. And to continue to look out for other people when you don't even want to live anymore.
Right.
I mean, that's true. That's true honor. That's true camaraderie.
He did it in a way that wasn't tacky or distasteful, Sanderson. Because I feel like I can get bored with that character, that type of character, but it was the way that he was able to kind of inspire those around him, even when he didn't believe in himself. People saw something in him that he didn't know was inside of him, with or without Syl. You know what I mean? His principles was like, I don't want to die carrying these bridges. I'm going to make sure that I'm basically training for it so I'm not tired on the battlefield. And just working everyone in to inspire that loyalty, that drive to be the best, even if the best that you could achieve was nothing, but be the best at your level.
And that, I mean, it resonates with most readers because we've seen it in real life. You've been to that shit job. You've been in that situation where the morale is at an all-time low. Everyone's out for their own. No one cares about doing the right thing. And somebody decides to do the right thing repeatedly for no benefit to themselves. And it's infectious.
Yeah.
It's just as infectious as a bad worker.
Absolutely.
And I've seen it so many times. It just takes off. And that's why it resonates, is because readers have seen it, or they feel the truth inside.
Or they desire for that person to be around them. If you don't know that person as a reader, you're just like, man, where is that person in real life? Or
it's you. That's the ultimate test, is when you realize this has to be me, because no one else, why would I expect someone else to do this?
Yeah.
And luckily, we're not in positions usually as terrible and harrowing as bridge crew.
Bridge 4, baby.
Yeah, that's that whole thing is just so crazy. And then, yeah, for him to, make these decisions to protect his own bridge crew, and then come to the horrifying realization that by protecting my own bridge crew, I've endangered command.
Right.
Because all the Parshendi decide to fire on the actual soldiers instead of on the bridge crews. And then
It's so cool.
And then that's just another blow. We are just cannon fodder. But he continues it. And at that point, other members of Bridge 4 were also continuing it, even without him.
Right. And that's why he's such a good character, because he just inspired those around him in such a hopeless spot. And the whole storm leaving him out to die, I was convinced for a second, damn, he died. And I thought someone else in the bridge crew was going to step up and be like, next one. Damn, he died. All right.
Yeah, you have candidates.
Yeah.
You have Rock, you have Heft. You have other candidates to replace Kaladin, especially going in and only having read the first Way of Kings book. I don't know what kind of writer he is. I don't know if he's J.R. Martin. And
that was the first, yeah. I was expecting, which goes to some of the complaints that I had at the time when I read the book. But yeah, I thought he was like, because I think Martin ruined fantasy for me in the best of ways. Well, this person's going to die. I was thinking that the entire way with Dalinar, honestly. He's too honorable. These people don't make it in these stories. And I thought it was just paving the way for Adolin to kind of just come up and be the man that Dalinar wanted to be. But yeah, so that was actually one of my complaints. Man, he should have died. A necessary evil to launch Adolin, but that didn't happen. But I see now why they didn't do it. But
Shallan's arc is super good.
Yeah, dude. I thought she was going to be the most boring chapters in the book, and hers were very, very interesting.
Yeah, her back and forth with
Yasna.
back and forth is so good. It really is immediately set as a master and apprentice relationship, a teacher and student relationship, and the turmoil that Shallan's going through as she gets to know Yasna Kholin more, knowing I'm going to have to betray her. I'm going to have to get that soulcaster.
Necessary evil. It's the whole philosophy thing.
Right.
And that's the most practical philosophy lesson. She didn't even know it was happening.
And that's when you see that dipole of Sadeas and Dalinar. And these are older men that they have already set who they are with their ways. And then you have Kaladin and Shallan, who are both much younger and starting the prime of their life, and they have to choose. And arguably, Shallan chooses wrong, and luckily enough, she's able to continue her situation, and Yasna doesn't die, and it turns, you have a whole bunch of really cool stuff that happens.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, the way that she was followed by those, were they Spren? Not really. Agents of the other realm.
Right, because she shifts to the cognitive realm. And yeah, that whole, the descriptions that Sanderson has of the cognitive realm are so crazy. Just that like every object in the physical realm has like a sphere. And there's just a sea of spheres.
Yeah. It was very Tesseract-y.
Yeah.
I just imagine like everything was just like a bunch of, everything that had mass or structure was just spheres, and you could touch it and you could like sink through it. You had to have discipline to be able to like walk through there without going mad and drowning in the absence but presence of the mass that was in the mechanics that was laid out in that realm.
Yes.
I have a hard time explaining it, but when you read it, it makes sense.
The idea that you go into this other world and you convince a pile of wood to light itself on fire.
Is that essentially what you do? And
I mean, that's what she was doing.
I remember that.
She was like dying of exposure.
Oh, that's right. That's book 2.
Is that book 2?
I think so.
Okay. Well, I'm getting confused here, but
minor.
That whole idea of, object permanence is an illusion, and it's starkly shown to you in the cognitive realm. It's such a cool concept.
It's really cool. The way that everything kind of happened there with, what's the guy's name? The Ghost Blood, who was trying to jump her drawers.
The religious guy.
Yeah. Ended up being a piece of shit, trying to poison her. That was a pretty cool scene. And the way that they described that she was in the infirmary under suicide watch. It's just so realistic, working in the ER. It's exactly like, it was so accurate to what we would do. It's just hilarious. Oh yeah, this is exactly what it'd be like. Yeah, just her arc is so good. It's just she did so well seizing opportunity, even with missteps, being able to finagle her situation to get where she needed to be. And Jocelyn, and she saw that. You know what I mean? I don't think for a second that she was going to let her go. I think she was trying to teach her a lesson.
It's possible.
Because she knew that. Do we know what she is in the book one?
Yasna?
Yeah. And Shallan.
And Shallan. I don't think know what Shallan is.
She said that she had an idea of what she was, but she didn't go into detail. And I think for that, she was not going to let her go. I think she was just
the fact that Shallan had a shard blade.
Yeah.
Am I really going to let this person go? Yeah. That knows that possesses a shard blade. Oh, that's Yasna's kind of I want to say like the stabilizing force between idealism and pragmatism, because it's almost like her ideal is pragmatism, but I haven't seen her ever sacrifice somebody for her own motives. But again, she murks that kill squad without a second thought. Those people that come to kill them, And that was the whole philosophy argument between her and Shallan. Shallan thought she wasn't justified, and they were just
Yeah. So it was really interesting. What was it? The whole Sadeas and Dalinar situation. My buddy was telling me, "Oh yeah, Sadeas is a good guy." So I was like, "Yeah, the voice is telling him to trust Sadeas. Yeah, he's a good guy." And then when he turned and left, "You bastard, you dirty bastard," and then tried to go back and lie about it.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised at the end, because the whole time Kaladin has justifiable hatred towards Light Eyes, all Light Eyes, and he's been burned by them multiple times. And I think with me as the reader, I think a lot of that time I was reading the book, I was wondering, is Dalinar really as stand-up as he presents himself to be?
I didn't have a shadow of doubt.
See, I wasn't sure.
I just didn't know that he was going to pay that price.
Because I mean, yeah, it is amazing, but it says a lot to that character for what you're willing to give to stand up for justice.
And your word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the meaning of giving up that sharp blade as a Light Eyes, where, you know what I mean, that earns you reputation, and he was going to just give it all away on his word, which was, in theory, practicality, a Light Eyes really didn't have to do that. But okay, go back to the bridge, because it's a Light Eyes, and that's just how that social class was built.
If you think about it, the shard blades, and to a lesser extent the shard plate, are kind of that's the currency of power in this world.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, the gem hearts and spheres and all that, but the real power currency is shard blades. And yeah, to give one up is just that's a powerful statement.
One of the interesting things about Shallan that made everything go, "Oh my God, that's crazy," was the fact that when they discovered that the Parchman was basically a sleeper cell group, just waiting to be unleashed. At least that was Jocelyn's theory at the time. Oh my God, dude, they're everywhere. Just a trap waiting to happen.
And having to go through such lengths to find that information.
Right.
Because of the suppression of the Vorin Church and the suppression of the history of the continent and the planet. I mean, yeah, to stumble upon that truth, oh my God, everybody should know, but I'm terrified for anybody else to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to how I feel it reminds me of Final Fantasy. I feel like Kaladin is basically a dragoon. The way that he jumps in the air with the spear and it does these jump attacks, and him being, I'm not sure if that's disclosed in the first book, but people can infer he's going to be a great hero. But
he starts developing powers. I mean, what's the first one? He heals himself because he has a sphere that's spent after the high storm, after he survives the high storm. And then
his arc.
Who had that theory? Was that Teft?
Teft.
He put more charged spheres by him, and then he drained him. So he starts to develop crazy powers.
Yeah, it's so crazy. The book is so good. There's just so many good arcs, and we feel like we didn't even scratch a lot of it.
Right.
But it's just so much to read, but not feeling burdensome. You almost don't want it to end.
Yeah, there's always something new to hold on to. There's so many threads that Sanderson's juggling at once, and he does it really, really well in this first book. Obviously, he's one of the most prolific writers, probably the most prolific fantasy writer of the age. And it shows because he's able to juggle all of these different plot lines, and it just...
He's Elon Musk of fantasy.
He ties everything together and does it in a way that looks easy. Yeah. It's not easy.
Yeah. He's something. But yeah, I think this is outside book one, but a buddy of mine told me that after the fifth book, he's basically stopping, and he's not even going to write the book number 6 until 2030.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Because he's working on the rest of Mistborn.
Okay, so yeah, don't get too excited, but I'm okay with it. I mean, like I said,
Fine.
I grew up reading Jordan and, catching up and falling behind, catching up, falling behind. And then I'm just, I'm okay with, as long as each book has a solution or what am I trying to say? A falling action, a denouement. As long as it has that, I'm okay with shelving a series for a while and then coming back.
For sure.
And yeah, like I said, sound like I'm getting paid to do this. I'm not. The audiobook, great way to, reread, re-listen. And
It's on Spotify for free. I think it's free.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
The audiobooks are on Spotify.
All right.
Even the Mistborn.
But yeah, highly recommend it as a good way to catch back up or to listen or reread.
It's a good one. Everyone should read it if you're into fantasy. Highly recommend. 7.8. He says 7.5. Solid. Well, thanks for coming by. I started the third book. It's pretty good.
Nice.
Awesome.
I like the third book a lot.
Bridge 4 for life.